On this edition of Dream Garage, we visit what only can be described as a cobra's nest. I'm your host, Ray Iddings, and our Dream Garage is a shrine to the Ford Cobra. Lynn's Dream Garage uses every inch of floor and wall space to pay homage to Lynn's favorite car, the Cobra.
My name is Lynn, and I have been a Cobra fanatic for 52 years. A lot of people refer to my garage as Cobra Heaven or the Snake Pit, something to do with Cobra because it really revolves around Cobras. But I was a Ford hot rodder until 1962 when the Cobra came out, and I said, this is it. This is my passion. I've got to say that Carroll Shelby gave me a passion for the next 50 years.
Lynn's love for the Cobra took a lot of space in his heart, but this snake pit would also require a lot of garage space.
The garage, when we moved into this house in 1964, was a 3-car garage with a little office attached to it. And we enlarged it backwards 3 more cars width. So it made it into a 6-car garage with this little office next to it. And then a number of years later, we added the big portion. So now there's actually 25 cars in here.
During the renovation, Lynn acquired a stockpile of Barnwood from a friend's ranch. Lynn knew this was the perfect accent to line the inside of his dream garage.
In 1975, we were visiting some friends in Colorado, and they had a big ranch, had all these big enclosures built, and it was built out of this old Barnwood. And he was tearing those down, so when I was there, I was helping him, and I said, what are you gonna do with this wood? And he said, I'm just gonna throw it away. I said, no, and loaded it all up and took it away. I had no idea what I was going to do with it. So when my wife and I moved here in '81, I took the Barnwood and did all of this Barnwood myself. The garage was built, but I covered all the inside with the Barnwood. And then when I did the garage next door, the bigger version, I went online, and eBay is such a wonderful thing. I found Barnwood that you could just buy by the square foot, whatever you needed, and I did the same thing next door.
With the Barnwood look in place, Lynn set out to make his dream garage his scrapbook from the past. He has an array of collectibles as well as things he has found while on outings. Condition doesn't matter to Lynn, it's all about the story.
This is the older part of the garage. It's been here for 50 years. It's where I've got a great accumulation of stuff hanging on the walls. The cars in here are all of which I've had a long time. This little guy here is a 1932 4-door sedan. And this was kind of done before 4-door sedans were the hot rod of choice. Now everybody kind of likes a 4-door, but for years the 4-door was the one that was just kind of thrown away. And if you'll notice, this poor thing has had snow and ice. It's been repainted from here down, but a lot of this car is still original paint. It's all original except it's got a small block Chevy engine. It's got hydraulic brakes and 12 volts. So it does everything it's supposed to do, but it still looks and acts like a 32 Ford. This little guy here is the 10th Cobra built. I bought that car in 1970. It was in pieces, as a lot of the cars that I buy because I like working on them. We've restored it. It's been raced since 1982. It's won the Best Ford Award at the Monterey Historic Races. It's been shown at Pebble Beach. There's so many pictures of Carroll Shelby in this car, it's just amazing. But that is really a good Cobra. That might be one of the most famous Cobras around just because of the fact that Carroll Shelby used it so often for his personal purposes, not to drive it, but for pictures, for advertising, that sort of thing. Just a really good car. The yellow Cobra is one that we use specifically for our Cobra tours that we go on. Specifically, there's one tour that we do in the fall of every year called the Cobra 1000. It's a tour in the western United States somewhere. We tow our cars there, unload them, and drive for 1,000, 1,200 miles through rain and snow and heat, all those sorts of things. But this is the car that we use for that. It's just really dialed in. It's got high rear end gears in it so you can cruise without having the engines turn 4,000 or 5,000 RPM. It's just a good little car for that, very comfortable. And the other beauty of it is it's easy to see on the road. The guys that are behind me love to have me up in front because they can see the car. They know where they're going, and it's been a really good car for that purpose. And if you just look around, there is stuff everywhere that rather than put it in a drawer somewhere, I like my collection, such as it is, to be seen by people. If you look under the plexiglass on the workbench, there's all these old bills currency bills from other countries when I was in the service, and just going around, whenever I'd see a bill, some sort of low dollar currency, I would get it and stick it under there rather than put it in a drawer somewhere where you'd never know what it is. So I enjoy doing that, but to some people it's just a little cluttered. But I kind of like it because it's all stuff that I haven't really collected. Collected to me means that you've paid for it, you went out and bought it to collect it. And this is just stuff that I've accumulated over my years of playing with cars.
Lynn is without a doubt a Cobra fanatic. The other dream garage on his property houses another 10 Cobras and an old school Dragster.
This Dragster is one of the original front-engined, just top fuel dragsters from the 60s that was in the golden era of drag racing. And the reason I've got it is I wanted to have an engine stand so I could fire up a motor so people could hear a car run or hear an engine run. And I thought, well, wait a minute, what a perfect engine stand a dragster would make. So this buddy of mine had this car for sale and I bought it. And it's not been restored, it's been repainted once because somebody painted it purple along its life. But that's all the original body work, and it's body work by Tom Hanna. It's a chassis by Don Long. Dave Zuschel built the engine. I mean, this is the epitome of a front-engined dragster. So it's a lot of fun. Again, a very limited use car, but it's pretty and it's bright. It makes a nice display in here. These engines are really fun because surprisingly few people know what an engine looks like out of a car. So I had the Cub Scouts over here the other day. They're going to get a merit badge on something to do with cars. So I showed them how to change the tire on my truck and showed them the engine. I said, you guys know what's inside an engine? You know what oil does? And they said, no. They had not touched oil. I pulled the dipstick out to check the oil. And I said, any of you kids know what this is? No. I said, this is a dipstick. And the one little kid says, oh, that's my nickname. So I thought, well, how clever. But it's just fun to have an engine. These are different versions of Cobra engines that people don't get to see outside of a car. And this way they can see. This is a very rare Spalding flamethrower distributor. Used in early Cobras. It wasn't the most effective, but it's a neat looking distributor. So I put it on the motor, just again, for people to look at. This is a 289 Cobra, but it's one of the 5 cars that Carroll Shelby built for drag racing. Cobras were generally thought of, as road racers, not drag racers. But during the Shelby American years, early on, there were a handful of guys in the shop that decided they wanted to build a race car, a drag race car. And Shelby said, yeah, okay. So they built 2 team cars and ran them. And then all of a sudden, 3 more individuals wanted drag racing cars. So they built 3. This is one of the ones. This particular car was the fastest of the bunch. This was a 1086, 128 mile an hour car. But what makes it more fun is that Carroll Shelby bought this car back from the original owner. And he had it, was gonna restore it, and then wasn't, and wanted me to drag race it for him. And I said, Carroll, I can't do that. If I'm the one that crashes your car, my name is Dirt. So he finally sold it to me, and I restored it, and it is just the most fun car in the world. You gotta see the engine to really appreciate it. There is 500 horsepower of 289 Cobra just set up for drag racing. Drag racers have a little more compression. They can build a little wilder motor, so when you start this car, it is pretty impressive. It's another one, very limited use, but when you do use it, it's a lot of fun. This car here with its police blanket keeping its nose warm is another very, very good example of a color combination that was very prevalent in the early Cobra days. The white with the red interior. Not very many people kept the red interior because they didn't like red. They thought that's kind of a girl's color. So all the red interiors, most of them got switched to black. This is a very low mileage car. Been painted once, but it's just a nice original car. This particular car belongs to a friend of mine who lives in New York. Keeps the car here because it's handy and it doesn't rust away in New York. But it's just a sweetheart of a car. This car, it was a one-owner car. The fellow bought it new. His Offenhauser was his name, and he was part of the Offenhauser family that built the Offenhauser race motors and that sort of thing. He bought it new in '69. It was a demonstrator until that time. He drove it till '75, and it sat. He doesn't even remember why he parked it, but he didn't park it inside the garage. He parked it under a blue tarp in his backyard. Hence, you can see the paint is just, I don't want to say wasted, but it's pretty far gone because of the fact that he had this tarp on the car and it would sweat during the day and cool off during the night. But what it did, it gave the car such incredible patina all over. It's uniformly bad. I bought the car and I was going to restore it, and we had it at a car show one time, and Carroll Shelby saw it, and he just went crazy over the originality of the car and how it looked. He said, man, that thing is amazing. So that was 25 years ago, and the barn find thing just wasn't really in yet. But by the time I got deciding what to do with it, the barn find trend was in, and everybody wants a barn find. So this is your classic barn find. We call it Dirtbag. And it's another car that has its absolute original motor, transmission, rear end, wheels. I've got the original tires, but you don't use them because they don't work very well. But this car gets driven a lot, and it's another one that I like to open the hood on because the engine is kind of commensurate with the rest of the car as far as condition. I worked so many hours to restore this car mechanically without making it look like the car was restored. And that's half the fun, is the car doesn't look like it's been restored, but it runs like a top. It's got all new brake lines and brakes. All the things that are important have been done, so the car just runs very nicely.
This Dream Garage has a lot of bite. It has made the Snake Pit a happy home for any Cobra.
I collect cars because I enjoy working on them, driving with them, restoring them, racing them. My sons are involved with me, and about as much fun as you can have is take your two grown sons to a vintage race somewhere, and all three of you race a Cobra, and the satisfaction of having finished the race well and come back and have a beer together, it's just a lot of fun. Number 25 is a car that was road raced all through the 70s and 80s by a fellow named Fritz Schiffmeyer in the Midwest. He was the terror of Elkhart Lake and just about any other racetrack that he went to. This car was so highly developed, and Fritz was such a good driver that this car just won every race there was in the Midwest. We raced against him for a long time, and unfortunately died a few years back, and I bought the car from his widow. And it is a fun car. Here's another example of what they call an independent comp car. This car was raced in the 60s, but not by the factory. It just an individual bought the car, raced it, and it carried on throughout the years as a race car more than a street car. And it gets raced now occasionally. It participated in the Monterey Historics when Cobra was the featured car. Just a nice little car to drive. Next to it is number 91. This is another car that's been raced its entire life. It's a street car converted to a race car. The original owner was a fellow named Bill Jackson. He raced this car forever. Club events, nothing famous, never earned any money racing it, just a club car. But it's just a nice example of a used race car. You can see the paint isn't the best, but today you leave that the way it is instead of repainting it because it shows the car's patina. It kind of shows people this is a real car, not a replica, not a closet queen. It's just a real, genuine race car that you can drive anywhere. And this car is at the opposite end of the spectrum from the beat up race cars. This is your fancy race car. This is the first of 5 FIA Cobras that Shelby built. It was the epitome of a race car. It was the last iteration. It had the wider fenders, bigger wheels, big gas cap. An interesting little thing that it has are these 2 little dimples in the trunk. When they got to the first FIA race in Targa Florio, they realized that the FIA suitcase, to run in a GT class, they had to have this suitcase that would fit in the trunk, and it wouldn't fit. So they got their hammers out and bopped 2 little dimples in it to get the trunk to close over this suitcase. So the 5 FIA cars got those little things in them. This is what most people today think of as the Cobra race car. It's shiny, it's fancy, everything looks perfect on it, as opposed to some of these others that were just raced and didn't have the money to repaint them after every race and make them look perfect. The car up in front is a good example of the 427 SC with the side pipes, the big gas cap, the roll bar. The dash has no glove box in it. It's a good example of what this particular car is a Kirkham reproduction Cobra. but it is done so well. The Kirkham cars are aluminum, just like a real Cobra, so you would never tell this was not a real Cobra unless you knew. But it's just another good car. It's kind of fun to have around. When you want to have somebody drive a car that you're not sure how well they drive, you don't want them driving your expensive car, you say, go drive this one. Every piece that I have on the wall is something that I've done and collected as a result. It's not something I've gone to a store and bought. That doesn't have quite the same good memory or feeling as finding something on the side of the road beside a broken down car, or something you're taking apart, your motor that's blowing up, and oh, good, here's this old piston. Well, yeah, I don't want to throw it away. I want to save it because it reminds me of the good time I had during the race. And that's what almost everything in this garage has for me. This mural was done by George Bartel, almost 20 years ago. And George Bartel was an artist, they call him an illustrator, that did all the advertising for Carroll Shelby in the 60s. And he taught at Art Center School, quite an accomplished artist. And he used to paint on these pieces of paper like this that were 30 inches by 40 inches. And one of his friends said, well, that comes on a big roll that's 32 feet long. You ever thought about doing a painting on one roll? And the guy said, George said, sure, I can do that. So he just decided to start painting race drivers and cars, but mainly drivers, starting with Barney Oldfield way back there and finishing up with Jeff Gordon and Ayrton Senna and Dale Earnhardt at this end. And if you look closely, the faces that he does of race drivers, they look so much like the real person. I mean, Carroll Shelby, you don't have to say that's Carroll Shelby. It looks like Carroll Shelby. And you see Jimmy Clark, and you see Enzo Ferrari and Mario Andretti. If you just look closely at this thing, it is such a work of art. Carroll Shelby saw it and wanted it on display for his 75th or 80th birthday party. Really special. Everybody just made such a fuss. Now you see some of them have autographs of the drivers. Some just have their name written by them that George did himself. So they're not all autographed, but it is a particularly nice piece of artwork.
This dream garage has given Lynn a place to keep his memories. They're hung on the walls, glued to the cabinets, showcased on shelves, and parked all around.
To me, the car hobby is just the best, especially when you can do it at your home. You're not off someplace else. I mean, I limit my car collection size to what I can keep here at the house, and it's just a lot of fun.
Lynn has one enviable Cobra collection and will continue to acquire, restore, race, and show off his amazing stockpile of memorabilia and horsepower. Join us again for Dream Garages.
Like this show? Want more? Then head to WatchPTTV.com, the new 100% free PowerTube TV streaming network. Home of the best classic and new motorsports racing and build shows on the web.